This happened in June 2018 in Portland, Oregon. I understand and I act like an idiot in this situation. Since then, I have become much more observant, cautious, and honestly much more paranoid. I went dancing with my friends and I was really drunk by midnight. Unfortunately, this was back when I had little money and I realized you could save money by eating very little before going out, and it would take far fewer drinks to get drunk. So I was so drunk I barely remember my friend ordering me an Uber home. My phone was dead, of course. I can vaguely recall them helping me get into the car and telling me to get home safe. I don't remember greeting the driver or the first minute or so, but soon after getting in, he asked how my night was and if I smoked. Honestly, I was just thinking about bed at this point, so I sort of just slurred out that I did sometimes. He then offered me a joint, and this is the first moment I got sort of nervous and began paying attention. I tell him something like, "I'm really tired and just ready to get home." I think he said something about it being an indica-based joint and it made for great sleep. Once again, I say something not exactly like no, but not a yes, which he takes as a yes. I'll take that joint now. Once again, I'm so drunk enough I can barely see straight or speak clearly. So when he says, "Okay, well, I have to cancel the ride really quick because I can't give it to you while I'm on the clock," or something to that effect, it takes me a second to realize how dangerous that is. And by the time I start to say something, he has canceled the ride and pulls over. We were in an area just east of the Hawthorne Bridge, I think, and it was totally secluded. Some empty parking lots, a closed auto body shop, and nobody in sight. Starting to hit me, I'm now in the car, not with an Uber driver, but with some stranger. I can't call anyone, and he's trying to give me weed that could have anything in it. For the next minute or so, we're pretty quiet. Or I just can't remember any small talk he tried to make because I was beginning to panic. And every time he handed me the joint, I would take fake hits, just breathing into my mouth and not into my lungs. I felt tired, clumsy, and weak. That kind of drunk where you were almost at the point of nausea, and I knew I couldn't do much of anything to defend myself at that point. I remember vividly being fixated for a moment on the fact I didn't even have a pair of keys to defend myself with. My building used fobs for just about everything, and I didn't take my mail key with me. As I'm freaking out, I look up to see if this guy is sort of noticing, and I make eye contact with him in the mirror. He was staring, but I couldn't read his expression. Finally, he says something along the lines of, "Well, let's get out of here." I tell him I'll just call another Uber to get home, thinking at this point it might even be safer to walk. And he says, "No, I still have your address. I'll just take you home." For a moment, I was relieved. I guess I wanted to believe him so badly that I would get home safe that I believed him. I tried to calm myself down, thinking he hadn't actually done anything threatening. Maybe he was just your typical stoner guy and I'm overreacting. At this time, I lived on the PSU campus in downtown Portland in the southwest area of the city. He is driving me north on the east side of the river. There are several bridges to our left, and as he keeps moving north, he has several opportunities to take an exit to hop over the river and get me back downtown. He keeps skipping them. We keep passing bridge after bridge that could get me home. Up in northeast Portland, there are some large industrial areas that can get very isolated at night, and Portland in general is surrounded by lots of forests, so I knew he could have me in a secluded area really quickly. After he passes like the fourth exit for a bridge, I'm pretty sure it was the Broadway Bridge, I've been racking my brain for a way to make him actually take me home and say something to the effect of, "Hey, my boyfriend is waiting for me at home," which was true, though I said it in a very meek way. My driver says nothing, but he did take the next exit for a bridge and basically hung a giant U-turn that started taking me home. Even as we were on the west side of town heading south, I'm still shaking and have my hand on the door handle, thinking about just hopping out at a red light the closer we get to my apartment. My phone is completely dead, and he honestly still has several chances to hop onto nearby highways and speed out of the city. We're getting pretty close to my apartment now, and I'm once again trying to convince myself I'm being paranoid about some stoner that can't navigate the city. Although a few minutes before I was so scared I was crying. So once we get about 2 blocks from my apartment, I lie and tell him it's easiest to stop here and he can let me out again. He doesn't say anything but does slow the car. I'm flooded with relief and even feel myself smile. When I go to open the door, it's locked. I try to lift the lock mechanism manually, but it won't budge. I look at him instinctually to see what was up, and he's got his head turned around almost fully toward me, shoulders still facing the road, smiling. The worst smile I've ever seen. It looked so mocking, and it just did not reach his eyes at all. I started crying and asking him to open the door. I was so freaked out and still very drunk, and thankfully he did. I'll never forget the sensation of vulnerability. Not just being drunk in his car with no way to contact anyone, but even as I got out of the car, I kept feeling like he would somehow grab the back of my shirt and pull me back in, as silly as that sounds. When I got home, I found out my boyfriend had actually gone out with his friends last minute and wasn't even home. He wouldn't even know until much later if I hadn't gotten back safe. The next day, I convinced myself I was freaking out over nothing, which I realized could still be the case. But in my gut, I had truly felt in danger. The night before, technically, this guy could have been totally harmless, but I still think I should have texted my friend and had her report him. The big thing that made me think of this was recently hearing about how Ed Kemper, co-ed killer, would go for practice runs, picking up hitchhikers and seeing if he could get the passengers/potential victims to trust him or how far out of his comfort zone he could push them without them saying anything. Obviously, this guy wasn't Ed Kemper, but I hate wondering if that night was a practice run of sorts for my Uber driver. I've been working at a department store for the past 2 years. Although retail wasn't something I wanted to necessarily do, it was much better than my previous job in the food business. Though I was grateful to not have to touch food all day and would take the world of customer service much more gratefully than the food industry. It was the middle of January and the store is usually quite dead towards the end of the day. Usually the following month after Christmas is never really busy due to people probably not trying to spend money after the gift-giving season, and the cold weather of the winter season in Canada never really helped the situation much. People not being in the mood to leave the comfort of their own houses in the middle of a snowstorm. That meant that they put fewer people on shift and I was alone in the fitting room. I work at a pretty big store and alongside the weather conditions, that meant that the employees were usually spread out on the floor, not within close proximity in comparison to what they put in during the busy season. None of us wore earpieces as we did most of our paging through the speaker system. It was a Wednesday night around 8 o'clock and the store closed at 9. I was usually put on the cash register, but often frequent in the fitting room when I needed help. It was a very quiet night, and I spent the first couple of hours of my shift helping organize the beauty section that is right next to the fitting room, or going to speak to my lovely coworker who worked in the jewelry section, helping the few customers that actually wanted to try clothes on when they came by. There was a man who came to the fitting room with 2 dress shirts, and I didn't think anything of it. After all, he was nothing I've never seen before. Older, tall, kind of stocky, muscular, and plain. I did notice that he seemed dressed rather nicely in a clearly expensive suit and a nice shoulder bag. I assumed he must have come to the store after his day at work. I counted the number of articles he was bringing in, as that was mandatory in order for me to monitor the flow of clothes and try to stop theft. I handed him a number corresponding to the number of articles he was taking in and asked him politely to put the clothes back on the hanger in French rather than English, because Quebec requires us to speak French first to customers. To which he replied with a simple, "No problem." I noticed he had a thick accent, although I wasn't and still am not able to place my finger on it. I think it might have been Russian, but I can't say for sure. The men walked into the fitting room and I didn't think much of it. I helped the other customers who came out of their rooms, counting their articles they came out with and matching them with their numbers and hung them back in their place on the rack. A few moments passed by, and the man came out, not really putting much thought into it. I took both dress shirts from him, he didn't want any of them, and took back his number, said thank you, and turned to place the clothes on the rack. Usually this was the point where the customer would just leave the fitting room, but when I turned around to go back to the front, he was still there. I asked him if there was anything I could do for him or if he still wanted the shirts that I just put away. He smiled and looked at me, not answering, and I felt a weird feeling in the pit of my stomach. He was looking at me as if he wanted to say something, and I, being the 5-foot girl who had confrontation of any kind, just nervously laughed and started to organize the desk at the front of the fitting room entrance, awkwardly arranging all the numbers, although they were already in order. He asked for my name, to which I just looked down at my name tag I was wearing and repeated it. He told me it was a beautiful name. I laughed nervously, never knowing what to do in these sort of situations, and being nice to him was a part of my job in customer service. Besides, he didn't do anything wrong, just complimented me. I said thank you and looked away, avoiding eye contact. He then just stood there for what felt like 20 minutes, but in reality was just 3. He stood there as I held other customers, and it was beginning to make me very uncomfortable. Not wanting to be rude, but also not wanting to subject myself to being uncomfortable for the rest of my shift, or however long he was planning to be there, I asked him if there was anything else he needed help with. Here's where I really began to get scared. He then proceeded to tell me that he'd be waiting for me at 9:30 outside the doors of our store. He wanted to take me out. Confused, I looked at him oddly. How did he know that we finished at that time? The store closed at 9, and we usually spend 30 minutes cleaning up the store.